Marcus wiped the grease from his hands with a dirty rag, his eyes scanning the bustling repair bay of Station Prometheus. The massive space station orbited the mining planet Xerion, serving as a hub for countless species from across the galaxy. As the head mechanic for the station's engineering department, Marcus had seen just about every type of starship and technology imaginable. But today felt different somehow, like something was pulling at the edges of his consciousness. The station operated on a strict hierarchy that most humans found uncomfortable. The Galactic Council had established clear classifications for species based on their perceived value to the greater community. Humans, being relatively new to the galactic scene, ranked somewhere in the middle. Above them were the elegant Celestians with their advanced technology and the powerful Kreks with their military might. Below humans were species considered less useful or more primitive, including the Draknari. The Draknari were dragon-like beings, standing nearly 10 feet tall when fully grown, with iridescent scales that shifted between deep blues and purples. Despite their impressive appearance, they had been classified as a labor species after their homeworld was incorporated into Galactic Council territory. Most Draknari worked dangerous jobs that other species avoided, like deep space mining or hazardous waste disposal. They lived in the lower levels of stations like Prometheus, in cramped quarters that barely met basic living standards. Marcus had always felt uneasy about the caste system, but as a human, speaking out could cost him his job or worse. The Galactic Council didn't tolerate dissent from middle-tier species, so he kept his head down, did his work, and tried not to think about the injustices happening just a few levels below his workshop. The comm system crackled to life, interrupting his thoughts. Mechanic Torres to Base 7. Priority maintenance required on Celestian diplomatic vessel. Marcus sighed and grabbed his toolkit. Celestian ships were always a nightmare to work on, with their overly complex systems and condescending owners who treated mechanics like dirt. As he made his way through the station's corridors, he noticed the usual bustle of activity. Krek soldiers marched in formation, their heavy boots echoing off the metal floors. Celestian diplomats glided past in their flowing robes, their pale skin almost luminescent under the station's harsh lighting. And scattered throughout were humans like himself, working various jobs to keep the station running. Base 7 housed a sleek Celestian cruiser, its silver hull polished to a mirror finish. Ambassador Zephyros stood nearby, his tall frame draped in ceremonial blue robes. His species was known for their beauty and their arrogance in equal measure. "Human," Zephyros said without looking at Marcus. "The gravitational stabilizers are producing an irritating vibration. Fix it immediately. I have an important meeting with the Council in 3 hours." Marcus nodded and began running diagnostics on the ship's systems. As he worked, he could hear Zephyros speaking to his aide about inferior species and the burden of civilizing the galaxy. The words made Marcus's jaw clench, but he focused on his work. The problem was more complex than a simple vibration. The ship's stabilizers were running hot, likely due to poor maintenance or possibly sabotage. As Marcus traced the issue through the ship's systems, he noticed something odd in the power distribution logs. There were energy drains that didn't match any of the ship's official systems. "Ambassador," Marcus called out, "I'm seeing some unusual power signatures. You might have unauthorized modifications or—" "Just fix the vibration, human," Zephyros snapped. "I don't need a lecture on starship engineering from a glorified mechanic." Marcus bit back his response and continued working. As he delved deeper into the ship's systems, he discovered something that made his blood run cold. Hidden within the power grid were surveillance devices and what appeared to be some kind of neural disruptor technology. This wasn't just a diplomatic vessel, it was a spy ship equipped with mind control capabilities. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The Galactic Council wasn't just maintaining order through laws and regulations. They were actively suppressing other species through technological means. How many beings had been subjected to neural manipulation? How many of the primitive species were actually victims of deliberate mental interference? Marcus's hands shook as he continued his work, his mind racing. He needed to document this discovery, but he also needed to be careful. If Zephyros suspected that Marcus had uncovered their secrets, the human would likely disappear into a council detention facility, never to be seen again. As he repaired the stabilizers, Marcus used his personal scanner to record evidence of the illegal modifications. The device was disguised as a standard diagnostic tool, but Marcus had modified it himself to store encrypted data. If he could get this information to the right people, maybe something could be done about the Council's crimes. "How much longer, human?" Zephyros demanded, his voice sharp with impatience. "Almost finished, Ambassador," Marcus replied, keeping his voice steady despite the fury building inside him. "Just need to calibrate the final settings." As he worked, Marcus heard a commotion from outside the repair bay. Raised voices and the sound of something heavy being dragged across the metal floor. He tried to focus on his work, but the sounds grew louder and more distressing. Through the bay's observation window, Marcus caught sight of what was happening. A family of Drachnari was being forcibly moved through the corridor by station security. The adults were shackled and clearly injured, their scales dull and cracked. Between them limped two young Drachnari, barely more than children, their legs bent at unnatural angles. Marcus's heart clenched as he watched the family struggle. The younglings could barely walk, their broken legs causing them obvious agony with every step. But the security officers showed no mercy, prodding them forward with shock sticks whenever they slowed down. "Where are they taking those Drachnari?" Marcus asked Zephyros, trying to sound casual. The ambassador glanced out the window with disinterest. "Probably to the labor camps on Xerion. That family has been refusing work assignments for weeks. The council has decided to make an example of them." "But the children are injured," Marcus protested. "They can't possibly work in their condition." Zephyros laughed, a cold sound that made Marcus's skin crawl. "Drachnari heal quickly enough. A few broken bones won't kill them. Besides, they should have thought about the consequences before defying council orders." Marcus turned back to his work, his mind churning. The labor camps on Xerion were notorious death traps, mining operations in toxic environments that killed workers within months. Sending injured children there was essentially a death sentence. And from what Marcus was learning about the Council's true nature, this cruelty was probably intentional. As he finished the repairs on the Celestian ship, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. He couldn't stand by and watch innocent children die, especially when he had the skills and knowledge to help them. The discovery of the Council's neural manipulation technology had opened his eyes to the true scope of their evil, and he refused to be complicit any longer. "Repairs complete, Ambassador," Marcus announced, closing his toolkit. Zephyros nodded dismissively. "See that you file the proper maintenance reports. And human, if you mention anything unusual about my ship, you'll find yourself assigned to waste recycling duty for the next decade." Marcus nodded and left the bay, his mind already formulating a plan. He had access codes for most of the station's systems, including the detention levels where the Drachnari family was likely being held. If he could get to them before they were transferred to the planet's surface, he might be able to help. But first, he needed to know more about their injuries and what kind of medical supplies he could acquire. Marcus made his way to the station's medical database, using his engineering credentials to access patient records. What he found there made his determination even stronger. The Drachnari younglings had been injured 3 weeks ago in a mining accident that was clearly the result of safety violations by their human supervisors. Instead of receiving proper medical treatment, they had been given basic pain suppressors and told to return to work. When the family protested and demanded real medical care, they were branded as troublemakers and marked for deportation to the labor camps. Marcus scrolled through the medical records, his anger building with each detail. The children's legs had been fractured in multiple places, and without proper treatment, the bones were healing incorrectly. They would be crippled for life if someone didn't intervene soon. The station's chief medical officer was a Celestian who had repeatedly denied treatment to non-essential species. Even if Marcus tried to go through official channels, the family would be on a transport to Zerion before any paperwork was processed. As Marcus studied the medical data, he began to formulate a plan. His engineering knowledge included extensive training in biotechnology and medical equipment. The station's medical bay was automated for most procedures, and Marcus had helped design some of the systems himself. If he could get the family there during a shift change, he might be able to perform the necessary procedures without detection. The risks were enormous. If he was caught helping the Draknari, Marcus would face charges of theft, unauthorized medical practice, and sedition against the Galactic Council. The minimum sentence would be life in a penal colony, but more likely, he would simply disappear. But as Marcus looked at the images of the injured children, their young faces twisted with pain, he knew he had no choice. Sometimes a person had to stand up for what was right, regardless of the consequences. Marcus spent the rest of his shift gathering supplies and information. He memorized the guard rotation schedules, identified the medical equipment he would need, and planned the safest route through the station's lower levels. Everything would have to be perfect, because he would only get one chance. As his shift ended, Marcus made his way toward the detention levels, his heart pounding with anticipation and fear. He was about to risk everything for a family of beings he had never met, simply because it was the right thing to do. In a galaxy where compassion was seen as weakness and moral courage was a luxury few could afford, Marcus Torres was about to discover what it truly meant to be human. The detention level of Station Prometheus was a maze of narrow corridors and reinforced cells, lit only by dim emergency lighting that cast long shadows on the metal walls. Marcus moved through the passages with practiced stealth, his engineer's knowledge of the station's layout serving him well. He had disabled several security cameras along his route, making it appear as routine maintenance rather than sabotage. The Draknari family was being held in Cell Block D, according to the records Marcus had accessed. As he approached their location, he could hear low, rumbling sounds that he realized were Draknari vocalizations. The sounds were filled with pain and despair, making his chest tighten with determination. Marcus activated his portable scanner, checking for guard positions and electronic surveillance. The corridor was clear, but he knew the patrol schedule would bring security officers through this area in less than 20 minutes. He had to work fast. Cell D7 contained the family, and Marcus felt his breath catch as he got his first close look at them. The two adults were massive, even by Draknari standards, their scales a deep blue-purple that seemed to absorb the dim lighting. Despite their size and fearsome appearance, they were clearly exhausted and beaten down by weeks of mistreatment. The two younglings huddled between their parents, and Marcus could see the extent of their injuries. Their legs were twisted at unnatural angles, poorly healed fractures that had left them unable to walk properly. The younger child, who couldn't have been more than 8 years old in human terms, was unconsciously whimpering with each breath. "Who approaches?" the male adult asked in heavily accented Standard Galactic, his deep voice filled with protective wariness. Marcus stepped into the light where they could see him clearly. "My name is Marcus Torres. I'm a station engineer, and I'm here to help." The female Draknari hissed, a sound of disbelief and suspicion. "Human lies. Humans serve the Council. You come to take cubs away." "No," Marcus said firmly, pulling out his medical scanner and toolkit. "I came to treat their injuries. I've seen their medical records, and I know what happened to them. The mining accident, the denied treatment, the deportation order. It's all wrong, and I want to make it right." The male Draknari studied Marcus carefully, his golden eyes searching for signs of deception. "You risk much for strangers, human. Why?" Marcus met his gaze steadily. "Because it's the right thing to do. Because those children don't deserve to suffer for the Council's bigotry. And because someone needs to stand up to this corrupt system." The parents exchanged glances, communicating in rapid Draknari that Marcus couldn't understand. Finally, the female spoke again. "I am Zara. This is my mate Voss and our younglings Kira and Jax. If you truly wish to help human Marcus, we accept." Marcus nodded and approached the injured children, moving slowly to avoid startling them. Up close, the damage was even worse than he had imagined. Both children had multiple fractures in their legs, and the bones had begun healing incorrectly. Without proper intervention, they would be permanently disabled. "I need to get them to the medical bay," Marcus explained as he scanned their injuries with his portable equipment. "The procedures they need require surgical equipment that I can't bring here." "Medical bay is guarded," Voss rumbled. "How do we pass unseen?" Marcus had been working on that problem all day. "Maintenance access tunnels. The medical bay has a service entrance that connects to the engineering sections. It's not monitored as heavily as the main corridors." As he spoke, Marcus was already working on the cell door's lock mechanism. His engineering access codes opened most systems on the station, and the detention center was no exception. The magnetic lock disengaged with a soft click. "Can the younglings travel?" Marcus asked, noting how much pain they were in. Zara gathered the smaller child, Jax, into her arms while Voss lifted Kira. "We endure. Lead the way, human Marcus." The journey through the maintenance tunnels was harrowing. The passages were narrow and poorly lit, designed for human-sized maintenance workers rather than 10-foot-tall Draknari. Voss and Zara had to crouch and crawl through sections that were barely wide enough for their massive frames. Marcus led them through a complex route that avoided the main security checkpoints. His years of maintaining the station's infrastructure had given him an intimate knowledge of every conduit, access panel, and forgotten passage. They moved in silence except for the occasional whimper of pain from the injured children. After what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes, they reached the service entrance to the medical bay. Marcus checked his scanner again, confirming that the area was clear of personnel. The night shift in medical was minimal, with only automated systems and emergency staff on duty. "Wait here," Marcus whispered, activating his override codes to unlock the service door. "I need to make sure the surgical suite is available." The medical bay was a gleaming expanse of white surfaces and advanced equipment, representing the best medical technology the galaxy had to offer. Unfortunately, that technology was primarily reserved for the upper-tier species. Marcus had helped install many of these systems, and he knew how to operate them without triggering the normal authorization protocols. Marcus activated the surgical suite and began preparing the equipment he would need. Bone reconstruction required specialized nanomedical tools that could rebuild fractured tissue at the cellular level. The procedures were complex, but Marcus had studied enough biotechnology to understand the principles involved. He returned to the service entrance and guided the Draknari family into the medical bay. The adults looked around in wonder at the sophisticated equipment, clearly having never seen such advanced facilities before. "This is where the council members come for treatment," Zara observed, her voice bitter. "While our younglings suffer with broken bones." Marcus began setting up the surgical platforms, adjusting them for the children's size and physiology. "Not tonight. Tonight, your children get the same treatment as any council ambassador." As he worked, Marcus found himself talking to the family, learning about their lives and their struggles. Voss had been a sculptor before the council's occupation of their homeworld, creating beautiful works of art from crystal and metal. Zara was an engineer herself, though her knowledge was dismissed by the council as primitive craftwork. On Drachna, before the council came, we lived in harmony with the land, Voss explained as Marcus prepared Kira for surgery. Our cities were built into the mountains, powered by geothermal energy. We had art, music, science. What happened? Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew. The council declared us a developing species in need of guidance, Zara replied, her scales darkening with emotion. They said our technology was inefficient, our culture backward. They relocated most of our population to workstations like this one, claiming it was for our own benefit. Marcus felt his anger building as he listened to their story. It was the same pattern he was seeing throughout the galaxy. Advanced species using their technology and political power to enslave others under the guise of helping them. The first surgery began with Kira, the older of the two children. Marcus used neural blocks to prevent pain while the nano-medical tools carefully broke apart the incorrectly healed bone fragments. The process was delicate, requiring precise control to avoid damaging healthy tissue. As he worked, Marcus was amazed by the resilience of Drachnari physiology. Their bones were denser and stronger than human bones, but they also had remarkable regenerative capabilities when given proper treatment. The nano-tools were able to stimulate natural healing processes that had been interrupted by poor medical care. You have skilled hands, human Marcus, Voss observed, watching the surgery with fascination. On Drachna, you would be honored as a healer. I'm just an engineer who learned some medical skills, Marcus replied, focusing on the delicate reconstruction work. But thank you. Hours passed as Marcus worked on both children, carefully rebuilding their damaged bones and repairing torn muscle tissue. The procedures were exhausting, requiring intense concentration and steady hands. But gradually, the children's legs began to take on normal shapes again. As dawn approached and Marcus was finishing the final surgery on young Jax, alarms began sounding throughout the station. Red lights flashed, and automated announcements echoed through the corridors. Security alert. Unauthorized access to medical facilities. All personnel report to duty stations immediately. Marcus's blood ran cold. Someone had discovered their presence, which meant their escape window was rapidly closing. Station security would be flooding the area within minutes, and there was no way to get the family back to the detention level without being caught. We must flee, Zara said urgently, gathering her children who were still groggy from the medical procedures. Where? Marcus asked, his mind racing through possibilities. Every exit from the medical bay leads through monitored corridors. Voss stood to his full height, his massive frame casting a shadow over the surgical equipment. Then we fight. No, Marcus said firmly. Violence will only make things worse. There has to be another way. As he spoke, Marcus was accessing the station's systems through his portable interface, looking for any possible escape route. The medical bay was in the central section of the station, surrounded by high-security areas and main corridors. Traditional escape routes were out of the question. But then Marcus remembered something from the station's original construction plans. There was an emergency evacuation system built into the medical bay, designed to jettison critical patients to safety pods in case of catastrophic station failure. The system had never been used, but it should still be functional. I've got an idea, Marcus said, rushing to a maintenance panel on the far wall. There's an emergency evacuation system that can launch escape pods directly from this bay. If I can activate it, we can get you off the station entirely. And go where? Zara asked. Every system in this sector is controlled by the Council. Marcus paused in his work, realizing she was right. Even if they escaped the station, where could a family of fugitive Drachnari possibly go? The Galactic Council's influence extended across dozens of star systems, and their neural manipulation technology made it nearly impossible to find safe harbor. But then Marcus remembered the data he had gathered from the Celestian ambassador's ship. The evidence of the Council's illegal neural control technology could be the key to exposing their corruption to the wider galaxy. If that information reached the right people, it could spark a revolution that would free not just this one family, but millions of oppressed beings across the galaxy. "I know where you can go," Marcus said, his fingers flying over the evacuation system controls. "There are free trader colonies in the Outer Rim beyond Council influence. And I have something that could help bring down this whole corrupt system." The sound of heavy boots in the corridor outside told them that security was getting closer. Marcus managed to activate the evacuation system just as the medical bay doors burst open, revealing a squad of armed guards led by none other than Ambassador Zephyros himself. "Step away from the Draknari, human," the Celestian ordered, his elegant features twisted with rage. "You have committed crimes against the Galactic Council that will see you executed." Marcus stood protectively in front of the family, his heart pounding but his resolve unwavering. "The only crimes here are yours, Ambassador. I know about the neural manipulation technology on your ship. I know how the Council really maintains control." Zephyros's face went pale, confirming Marcus's suspicions. "You have no idea what forces you're meddling with, mechanic. Stand down now, and your death will be quick." But Marcus wasn't listening anymore. He was looking at Voss and Zara, seeing the hope and determination in their golden eyes. These beings deserved freedom, deserved the chance to rebuild their lives and culture, and sometimes standing up for what was right meant taking risks that terrified you. Marcus activated the final sequence for the escape pods, knowing that in a few moments, the Draknari family would be launched into space with a chance at freedom. He also transmitted the data about the Council's neural control technology to the escape pod's communication system, ensuring that even if he was captured, the evidence would survive. The evacuation system engaged with a roar of mechanical systems, and emergency barriers began descending around the medical bay. In the chaos that followed, Marcus caught a glimpse of Kira and Jax standing on their newly healed legs, their faces bright with wonder and hope. Whatever happened next, Marcus knew he had made the right choice. He had given a family their future back and potentially started something much larger. In a galaxy ruled by fear and oppression, sometimes it took just one person willing to stand up and say no to change everything. The escape pod hurtled through space at maximum velocity, its small fusion drive pushing it beyond the gravity well of Station Prometheus and toward the Outer Rim territories. Inside the cramped passenger compartment, the Draknari family held each other close while their children marveled at their newly healed legs. Kira flexed her ankle carefully, watching in amazement as the joint moved without pain for the first time in weeks. "Mama, look! I can move my foot again!" Young Jax was attempting his first steps since the mining accident, his face glowing with joy as he discovered he could walk normally. "Papa, the human healer made us whole again." Voss and Zara exchanged glances filled with gratitude and worry. They were free, but at what cost to the brave human who had risked everything to help them? Through the pod's small viewports, they could see the massive bulk of Station Prometheus shrinking behind them, and they wondered what fate awaited Marcus Torres. Meanwhile, back on the station, Marcus found himself in the Council's detention facility, confined in a cell far more secure than the one that had previously held the Draknari family. Ambassador Zephyros had personally overseen his arrest, and the charges against him were severe: theft of medical supplies, unauthorized use of council facilities, aiding fugitive criminals, and most seriously, espionage against the Galactic Council. But Marcus felt no regret as he sat in his cell. Every time he closed his eyes, he could see Jax taking those first pain-free steps, could remember the hope in Kira's golden eyes as she realized her legs would heal properly. Whatever happened to him now, he had made a difference in the lives of 4 innocent beings. 3 days after the escape, Marcus was brought before a council tribunal for his preliminary hearing. The chamber was imposing, with high ceilings and walls lined with representatives from various council species. At the center sat High Arbiter Valdris, a Celestian whose pale features seemed carved from marble. "Marcus Torres," Valdris intoned, his voice echoing through the chamber. "You stand accused of multiple crimes against the established order. How do you plead?" "Guilty of helping innocent children," Marcus replied firmly. "Not guilty of any real crime." A murmur ran through the assembled representatives. Such defiance was rare among the lower-tier species, most of whom accepted council authority without question. Ambassador Zephyros rose from his seat, his face flushed with anger. This human has shown complete disregard for proper authority. He must be made an example of to prevent others from following his misguided path. But before the tribunal could respond, the chamber's communication system activated with an urgent message. A holographic display materialized in the center of the room, showing the face of Admiral Chen Wei, the human representative to the Galactic Council. "Honored arbiters," Admiral Chen said, her voice tense with barely controlled emotion, "I must request an immediate suspension of these proceedings. New evidence has come to light that directly affects this case." High Arbiter Valdris frowned, clearly displeased by the interruption. "Admiral Chen, this tribunal is already in session. What evidence could possibly justify such a request?" "Evidence of systematic neural manipulation by council forces," Admiral Chen replied, her words causing an immediate uproar in the chamber. "We have received detailed technical specifications and recordings that prove the use of illegal mind control technology against member species." The holographic display shifted to show technical schematics and data logs that Marcus recognized as the information he had gathered from Zephyros's ship. Somehow, the data he had transmitted to the escape pod had made its way to the right people. Ambassador Zephyros shot to his feet, his composure finally cracking. "These are fabricated lies, desperate propaganda from a criminal trying to escape justice." But Admiral Chen continued relentlessly. "The data has been verified by independent experts from 17 different species. The neural manipulation devices were found hidden in Celestian diplomatic vessels, including Ambassador Zephyros's own ship. The recordings show deliberate suppression of cognitive function in Draknari Vexari and at least 6 other species classified as labor castes." Marcus felt a surge of hope as he watched the tribunal members react to this revelation. Several of the alien representatives were looking at each other with expressions of shock and growing anger. If this evidence was genuine, it could expose the Council's crimes to the entire galaxy. High Arbiter Valdris called for order, but the chamber erupted in heated discussions as representatives demanded explanations. The carefully maintained hierarchy of the Galactic Council was beginning to crack under the weight of revealed truth. "Furthermore," Admiral Chen continued, "investigation teams have discovered that the so-called primitive technologies of suppressed species are far more advanced than Council records indicate. The Draknari civilization, for example, possessed sustainable energy technologies that surpass current Council standards. Their primitive status was artificially maintained through neural suppression. The implications were staggering. If the Council had been systematically suppressing the mental capabilities of entire species while exploiting their labor, then the entire galactic power structure was built on a foundation of lies and cruelty. Ambassador Zephyros made one last desperate attempt to control the situation. Even if these allegations were true, which they are not, it does not excuse this human's criminal actions. He stole medical supplies and aided fugitive criminals." But Admiral Chen smiled grimly. "Actually, Ambassador, those fugitive criminals are now under the protection of the Free Colonies Alliance. The Outer Rim territories have granted them full citizenship and are providing them with advanced medical care for injuries sustained under Council negligence." Marcus felt his heart leap. The Draknari family had made it to safety. Kira and Jax would be able to grow up free, their legs fully healed, their minds unencumbered by the Council's neural manipulation. Moreover, Admiral Chen continued, Voss and Zara have provided detailed technical specifications for Draknari engineering principles. Their expertise is already being used to develop new sustainable energy systems that could benefit the entire galaxy. It seems the Council's primitive slaves were actually advanced engineers whose knowledge was deliberately suppressed. The tribunal was in chaos now, with representatives from various species demanding investigations into their own treatment by the Council. The carefully maintained order that had oppressed billions of beings across the galaxy was beginning to crumble. High Arbiter Valdris attempted to restore order, but his authority was clearly undermined. These proceedings will be suspended pending a full investigation into these allegations. Accused Torres will remain in custody until... Actually, Admiral Chen interrupted, the Free Colonies Alliance has formally requested Marcus Torres's extradition as a political refugee. Under Galactic Treaty 447, he has the right to asylum from persecution for acts of conscience. Marcus could hardly believe what he was hearing. Not only had his actions helped save the Draknari family, but they had also triggered a galactic-scale revelation that could free countless oppressed beings. Over the following weeks, the scandal grew exponentially. Investigation teams from dozens of species descended on Council territories, uncovering evidence of neural manipulation and technological suppression on a massive scale. The carefully constructed lies that had maintained galactic order for centuries were exposed one by one. The Draknari were among the first species to regain their true cognitive abilities as the neural suppression technology was disabled. Within days, they were demonstrating engineering and artistic capabilities that astounded the galaxy. Their sustainable technology began spreading through the free colonies, providing clean energy and efficient resource management. Marcus found himself on a transport ship bound for the Outer Rim, his extradition approved despite Zephyros's protests. As he looked out at the stars, he thought about the ripple effects of his simple decision to help an injured family. The ship's communication system crackled to life, and Marcus was surprised to hear a familiar deep voice speaking accented Standard Galactic. "Human Marcus," Voss's voice rumbled through the speakers. "My family wishes to thank you for the gift you have given us. Not just healed legs for our younglings, but hope for our entire people." Marcus smiled, feeling warmth spread through his chest. "How are Kira and Jax doing?" "They run and play as children should." Zara's voice joined the conversation. "But more than that, they dream of futures they can choose for themselves. Because of your courage, our people remember what freedom feels like." The transmission continued with updates on the growing revolution across the galaxy. Species after species was throwing off Council control as the neural suppression technology was exposed and dismantled. The Galactic Council was fracturing as member species demanded accountability and representation. "There is something else, Marcus," Voss added. "The free colonies are forming a new alliance, one based on mutual cooperation rather than hierarchy. They have requested that you serve as an advisor, using your technical skills to help rebuild the technologies that the Council suppressed." Marcus felt tears forming in his eyes. His simple act of compassion had grown into something beyond his wildest imagination. The galaxy was changing, and oppressed beings everywhere were finding their voices again. When the transport finally docked at Freedom Station in the Outer Rim, Marcus was greeted by a sight that took his breath away. Representatives from dozens of species were working together to build a new kind of civilization. Draknari engineers worked alongside human technicians, Vexari artists collaborated with Zeltharian musicians, and children from many different species played together in the station's gardens. And there, waiting for him at the docking bay, were Voss, Zara, Kira, and Jax. The younglings ran to greet him on strong, healthy legs, their scales shimmering with joy and health. "Uncle Marcus!" Jax called out, having apparently adopted him into their family. "Come see what we've built." As Marcus was led through the station by his adopted Draknari family, he marveled at the advanced technologies on display. Sustainable energy systems, medical equipment that could heal any injury, and artistic creations that seemed to blend science and beauty seamlessly. "This is what the council tried to hide," Zara explained as they toured the engineering sections. "Every species has unique gifts, unique perspectives on how to solve problems. When we work together instead of in hierarchy, we can accomplish anything." Marcus nodded, understanding finally the true scope of what his actions had unleashed. The Galactic Council had maintained power by keeping species isolated and suppressed, preventing them from sharing knowledge and capabilities. But now, freed from those artificial constraints, the galaxy was entering a new era of cooperation and discovery. Years later, as Marcus helped design the first truly integrated colony ship that would carry representatives from hundreds of species to explore new galaxies, he often thought back to that night in the medical bay. He had started with a simple desire to help injured children, but that compassion had sparked a revolution that transformed the entire galaxy. Kira and Jax grew up to become brilliant engineers themselves, their natural talents enhanced by the educational opportunities available in the free colonies. They often worked alongside Marcus on new projects, their youthful enthusiasm and Draknari engineering instincts complementing his human innovation and determination. The Galactic Council still existed, but its power was greatly diminished. The neural manipulation technology had been banned throughout civilized space, and the rigid hierarchy that had once oppressed billions was gradually giving way to a more equitable system of cooperation and mutual respect. And somewhere in the outer rim, in a beautiful city built into a restored asteroid using Draknari architectural principles, two young dragons ran and played with legs that had been healed by human hands and hearts that had been freed by human courage. Their laughter echoed through halls decorated with art from a dozen different species, a reminder that sometimes the smallest act of kindness could change the universe. Marcus Torres had learned that being human wasn't about having the best technology or the strongest military. It was about recognizing suffering and choosing to act, about refusing to accept injustice even when fighting it seemed impossible. In a galaxy that had forgotten the meaning of compassion, humanity had reminded everyone what it meant to care for one another. The revolution continued to spread, species after species reclaiming their heritage and their dignity. And at the center of it all was a simple truth that Marcus had always known. When you see someone in need, you help them. Everything else was just details.